Good morning. My name is Ryan Martin, and welcome to Talk About It Tuesdays with CUNY Athletics. Today's webinar will be presented by Health First, and today's focus is going to be on mental health. We have a great group of panelists that will guide us through, and as always, as they are presenting, if you have questions, please feel free to put the questions in the chat box. So to get started, I want to introduce our panelists really quickly today, and then I'm going to turn it over to them because they have a lot of great content to share with you today. So first of all, we have Robert Cortez from the Bronx Memorial Community College Counseling Center. As well, we have Dr. Yoon Hudman, is the Health First AVP and Medical Director. And as well with them, we have, last but certainly not least, Dr. Bryant, who is currently the Director of Counseling Services Center and Adjunct Assistant Professor at John Jay College. Dr. Yoon, I'm going to turn it over to you first.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're really super excited to be here, spending some time with you all to talk about such an important topic for everyone. So if we move on to the next slide, what we're going to talk about today is, go over some data around, how much of an issue this is for college students and student athletes. We'll talk about how to recognize some signs and symptoms for common mental health and substance use issues, tips on how to keep and how to get help. So we're going to start with a couple of poll questions, and I thought this would be just, fun to get started around how much we actually know or, what we think might be happening out there. So the first question is, according to a 2016 American College Health Association survey, 85% of students felt overwhelmed by all that they do. B, 37% of students felt so depressed that it was difficult to function. C, 21% of students felt overwhelming anxiety. Or D, all of the above. So we'll start the poll and we'll give everyone, maybe 30 seconds or so, get a chance to weigh in. All right, so D, 71% of you said D. So let's look at the answer. And yes, the answer is D, all of the above. So, when we look at these stats, it's pretty significant, right? In addition to some of these survey statistics, there was a 2017 national survey on drug use and health. This was carried out by SAMHSA, which is a national agency, found that about 25% of college students reported having any sort of mental illness during the previous year, and 70.5% actually reported having a serious mental illness during that time as well. So the next question, this is a simple true and false. Student athletes are a lot less likely to have mental health and substance use issues. True or false? And we'll give that a little bit of time. Okay, and the answers are in. 65% false, 35% true. Okay, now let's look at the answer. It's false. So according to some studies done at Drexel and Keene universities, about 25% of student athletes reporting having clinically relevant depressive symptoms. The NCAA has actually been paying a lot of attention to, mental health and fitness for student athletes, and they've actually recently launched a campaign around this. Their data shows that about 42% of student athletes engaged in binge drinking, 70% smoke cigarettes, 15% use marijuana. About 2% actually misused narcotic pain medication, which is particularly relevant for student athletes, and 8% used ADHD medications, so drugs like Ritalin, Adderall, without a prescription. So while the numbers for student athletes are slightly lower than for general college students, as you can see, this is still a pretty significant issue for this population. So we'll go on to the next one, and this is the last poll question. College students are not at risk of suicide because they are young and healthy. True or false? Okay. False. Yes, and that was 100%. Okay, the answer, false. The same 2017 survey found that college students reported, about 10% of them reported having serious thoughts about suicide during the previous year. 3% planned it, about 1% attempted it, and about half of those that attempted it ended up needing medical attention. Suicide rates, just for the general population, have been trending lower over the past 10 years or so. However, very recently, over the past couple of years, we've seen a slight increase.
You didn't buy watermelon, right?
Watermelon? I think, panelists, can you please mute yourselves if you're not speaking? We have some background noise. Thank you. I think I was saying over the past couple of years, we've seen actually a slight increase in suicide rates nationally and New York State, particularly in this age group. So certainly a big issue for college students. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how to detect some signs and symptoms of some of these conditions. And we'll start with depression. So depression is one of those conditions that can really manifest itself in a variety of ways. You could have physical symptoms like feeling very tired all the time, fatigued, not having an appetite, not sleeping very well, having kind of aches and pains and feeling sick all the time. As well as kind of not being able to take care of yourself, like showering, those basic things that people are usually motivated to do. Along with physical symptoms, there are some behaviors that people may notice, having trouble focusing, not being able to kind of attend to their responsibilities. So for students, it would be going to class, right, completing assignments. Right, not really being able to attend to major responsibilities. Also withdrawing from friends and families, right, not engaging with peers. Probably the hallmarks of depression are around negative thoughts and feelings. So some of the negative thoughts that people may experience are feeling very worthless, helpless, like the future is bleak, and even sometimes feeling like life isn't worth living, or not wanting to be alive anymore, or even going as far as having thoughts of suicide. The feelings that go along with that, are just feeling very sad all the time. Younger people will often talk about feeling very angry and frustrated and irritable. And really having a lot of ambivalence, not being able to make decisions like they used to. So it's really important that, to note that you don't have to have all of these symptoms, right? You could have some, you could have just a few, but the most important thing is that if all of these symptoms kind of get to a point where they start interfering with how someone lives their life or functions in life, then it's serious, and help needs to be sought out. So next we'll talk about some signs of substance abuse or misuse. As we noticed that before in the statistics, right, that there's pretty significant amount of substance misuse in this age group. But some of the hallmarks that you see when someone is abusing or misusing is lack of control. So, someone may feel like they want to stop or cut down, but they're unable to. Mostly because of these incredible cravings, right? So they're not able to control the cravings. They spend a lot of time thinking about getting the drug or alcohol, using it, getting over it, right? So there's a lot of time wasted and spent on a daily basis, neglecting relationships, responsibilities, right? So not going to class, withdrawing from your friends and family. And really spending more time on your own, either using or recovering from the substance or alcohol. Along with uncontrolled substance use and alcohol, there are a lot of negative consequences, right? Harmful consequences, accidents, overdoses, problems with the law. And people that have a issue or a problem with use or misuse of substances, they will continue to use despite these negative, harmful consequences. Physical tolerance, as we all know, is just, kind of needing more and more as time progresses to get the same feeling. And withdrawal symptoms. And when we talk withdrawal symptoms, not just shaking, right, and feeling nauseous or vomiting in the physical aspects, but also the psychological aspects. Kind of like the anxiety and the depression that goes along with withdrawing from substances. So I'll turn it over to Robert now.
Thank you, Dr. Yoon. So as we mentioned before, suicidal ideation and suicide risk is something that unfortunately occurs with our college population, regardless of whether you're a student athlete or not. So these are some signs of suicide risk. You can take a look at the screen. By no means is this indicating that if you experience some of these, you are at risk of suicide, but these are just some signs to look out for, either with your friends, loved ones, teammates, or even for yourself. So you can see social withdrawal, feeling hopelessness, depression. Dr. Yoon mentioned change in hygiene, perhaps, right? Substance use, maybe an increase. Okay, hopelessness, a lot of times there's a preoccupation with death, and of course, suicidal ideation. So thoughts about not wanting to be here, thoughts of how, perhaps more risky would be thoughts of how you would do it. If someone has thoughts of putting their affairs in order, maybe selling, getting rid of their possessions, these are all signs that you want to be aware of. If you're at risk of any of these, you definitely want to get immediate help. If it's an imminent danger, you contact 911. We'll talk about some other resources later, such as NYC Well, which offers 24/7 risk assessment and support, which is great too. It's anonymous. Okay. Other things that you want to look out for, other signs and symptoms of stress, as we'll get into self-care later, could be caused by the current health pandemic we're in. So obviously COVID-19 has taken the world by storm. It's affecting all of us now, even as we broadcast this from our homes instead of in front of you. And some signs that you might be experiencing stress related to this are fear and worry about your health or the health of your loved ones, okay, financial situation or your job, or loss of support services you rely on. Also changes in sleep or eating patterns. Obviously, we're working from home, you're attending classes from home, as we may be in the fall, so difficulty concentrating and maybe separating and structuring your time, which can cause difficulty sleeping. We also see worsening of chronic health problems. Staying at home leads to us having sedentary lifestyles, not being as active as we want to be. Perhaps you're scared to go outside and be around crowds, Gyms are closed at the moment, so things can sort of worsen on you without realizing. Obviously, worsening of mental health conditions. Big part of a lot of our mental wellness is being social, right? And being outside and connecting with people. And it's difficult to do that in this virtual world. We have to use Zoom, we have to use FaceTime, we have to use WhatsApp, all these great apps and technology that we have, but it still doesn't replace human interaction, right? So it can be difficult at times. And as Dr. Yoon mentioned, increased use of tobacco, alcohol, or other substances such as marijuana, and others, to be named. So you want to be conscious if you're experiencing any of these, you may be experiencing pandemic stress. Okay. Similarly, there's a lot of tension and stress going on from what some are calling a race pandemic that is happening as well, which for many Black and Brown members of our community creates race-based traumatic stress. So I want to pay, sort of attention to this and mention this because this is a real thing. It affects a lot of us. I identify as a brown man of color, and I myself have to be conscious of these signs and symptoms. So one thing to note is that this resembles post-traumatic stress disorder in a lot of ways, right? And so it can lead to low self-esteem. You might find yourself needing to mentally distance from the traumatic event. So whether you were involved directly in the racial or discriminatory attack, or you just witnessed something on the news or heard about something, you might find yourself needing to just take a break. Nowadays with social media, it's really difficult. We have friends, family, enemies posting things from all sides of the discussion, right? And sometimes it's really easy to get sucked into these conversations and want to defend your perspective. At the same time, if you're someone who's been traumatized by these things, it's really challenging and can stress you out even more. So you want to be conscious to take a break when you need to, okay? Another thing you might notice is you might find yourself hyper vigilant to perceived threats or attacks. You might find yourself feeling defensive, feeling like you're looking out to defend yourself against racism or discrimination. And that's something you want to be conscious of. Watching certain shows may also trigger that. Okay? Of course, you may feel more depressed and angry. That goes without explanation. You also may have reoccurring thoughts of the event. This is the symptoms that I mentioned earlier, PTSD, right? Also physical reactions, such as headaches, chest pains, difficulty sleeping. Again, these are not uncommon, and there's many resources on racial trauma. So please, feel free to tap into our website at the BMCC Counseling Center, Borough Manhattan Community Counseling, College Counseling Center, for anti-racism and race-based trauma resources. Okay. Dr. Yoon is going to talk about some self-care strategies now.
Yeah, so, I think it's really important, like I mentioned, to just kind of think about where you are, right? And whether you're someone who has experienced these symptoms or conditions in the past, or you're experiencing for the first time, to really, know that you can take some actions to kind of, strengthen your health. So most importantly, maintaining and building support systems. So, stay in touch with your friends, your peers, your families, church members, right? Whatever it takes to just make sure that that you have your support system around you and keep them around, or create new ones, right? If you're new in school or in a new setting, it's important to seek out opportunities where you can actually engage with people and bond with people. And I know it's hard at this point since no one's really out and about, but, being able to do it over the phone or, online, there are opportunities out there. Monitoring symptoms, just even keeping a very brief daily journal can help you keep mindful about how you're feeling, but also track over time how you may be doing. And if you notice that things are getting worse, right, and make sure that you go and get the help that you need. Maintaining healthy habits. getting enough sleep. I can't really stress enough how important that is. I think, with the pandemic, people's sleep cycles are all messed up now, but maintaining good sleep habits really important. Keeping a healthy, well-balanced diet, avoiding drugs and alcohol, and exercising, which, I think is probably something that you all probably do on a regular basis. Reducing academic stress when they're there, so tapping into your professors, tutors, learning centers, right? Just do everything you can to kind of help yourself be in a better position to handle everyday stressors. Learning more about mental illness and substance use conditions, right? Going online, doing some searches, finding some reputable sources to learn more, maybe even taking a class, right? Taking a psychology class. That can really be empowering for you to be in a better place to kind of recognize what's happening with you and learn a little bit more.
Great. And so some self-care strategies specifically are focused around mind, body, and mind, spirit, and body, right? So let's take a little time now that we've got you all worked up, talking about signs and symptoms, to really focus on what you can do, because you're not stuck if you are experiencing some of these symptoms. There are ways to cope. And let me stress before I get into these, that the way self-care works is if you do a little bit each day, then the crisis or the stress that you experience when it happens will not feel as big, and it won't feel as such a giant thing that you need to tackle and cause you to explode. In other words, if you let a little bit of the stress out each day by practicing these things, when you're not in crisis, then you probably won't end up in a crisis and need to try to do everything on my list at one time, right? So for your mind and your emotional well-being, one of the things that we talk about is challenge those negative thoughts. So you want to adopt that growth mindset. I'm sure you all have heard of that. If you're athletes, right? It's not about the shot you make. It's not about the shot that you missed. It's about, or how many you've missed. It's about finally growing with each attempt, right? So you want to challenge the negative thoughts to say, okay, I may be stuck here, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be here forever. This is a temporary situation. Believe it or not, folks, we will get past this COVID situation. I believe that, right? And it's going to take some time, but we have to challenge those thoughts that make it feel like we won't. Dr. Yoon mentioned this, make time to connect with friends, right? So little social support goes a long way. It says at work, but whether it's at work, school, right? It doesn't matter. Even if it's just playing games, like there's online Pictionary, there's all kinds of games you can share with your phone. Very important if you're experiencing any trauma related to the pandemic, the two pandemics I mentioned, you want to limit your exposure to media, social media, politics. Turn off the news for a minute, right? Being connected to that is not good for your mental health. Constantly watching what the latest story is. When are we going back to, what phase are we in? Watching the briefings every day, that's going to kind of get you more stressed out. Seek counseling when needed. So I know at BMCC, we're still providing counseling remotely, as most of us are, I'm sure, in CUNY, using Zoom and confidential, platforms like this, one-on-one. Also, it helps to engage in goal-directed behavior. So if you're feeling unstructured because you can't separate your home life from your school life, from your work life, as most of us are, it helps to create a structure, create goals, right? Try to stick to a routine, okay? You all know about this. Basically, just move, okay? Find a way to move. If you're in your house, do some HIIT workouts, high intensity interval training, do some cardio, even if it's just jumping around, even if it's dancing, learning your newest TikTok dances, just get moving, right? There's so much online resources right now. You don't have to feel trapped. And actually, I think pools are open and, again, at your own comfort, but, there are ways to get outdoors a little bit as well and still be safe. Last but not least, for your spiritual well-being, I'm a big supporter of mindfulness meditation, and you can do that again with online support. Music is powerful. I don't know how many people here, but music is a universal language, right? As are books and art. Okay, create and practice meaningful rituals, things like journaling. I myself make a point to every day, I just try to write down one quote from something I heard in the day that was positive, that resonated with me. just so I could be mindful of something positive and not negative, right? Spending quality time with friends and loved ones. So believe it or not, folks, at 6 o'clock, I check out, I go outside into my living room, and I play with my kids till I can't. I make TikToks, we be silly. You know, we just do things that make it fun, right? And then again, watching YouTube or TikTok, not that I'm advocating for TikTok in this crazy moment that we're in, but yes, these brainless things are okay. It's okay to be silly, watch silly stuff. Not everything has to be so heavy, so serious. You need, even us as counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, we need to like loosen up, right? And be able to recharge for the next day. So please take a moment to take a screenshot of this if you like. This is a great worksheet that you can fill out on your own leisure and just list what works for you. What works for you may not work for the next person. Doesn't matter. It's about what works for you. Could be as silly or as, you know, extravagant as you need it to be. Okay. But again, list your barriers, because there's always going to be barriers. Anticipate the challenges, right? So that you can come up with appropriate coping strategies. Kind of like in sports, you don't think that you're going to have an easy path to score whatever sport you're playing in. You have to anticipate there's going to be curveballs, there's going to be someone blocking you, defending you, and you still need to sort of find a way to navigate around that. You don't just give up and go back on the bench or the side of the field, right? Sorry to use sports as an analogy, just saying. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Yoon. She's going to talk about some resources.
Yeah, so that's some really great advice, Robert. And, you know, this is just, you know, a very short list of available resources and help out there. You know, again, you know, your counseling center, they're still there for you. They're there. I mean, and I would really make, you know, good use of them. You know, they're there just to help you. So, you know, take advantage of it. If you're engaged with a primary care doctor or any health professional, reach out to them if you're having some difficulties with some of the symptoms we talked about earlier. They're there to ensure that you're well as a whole, right? Not just your body, but also your mind, and they can help you access some other resources as well and treatment if necessary. The link is to the NYC Well site that Robert mentioned earlier. It's run by New York City. It's really great. They have 24/7 access to a helpline. You can text, you can chat. And if you go on actually on the link, you'll see they have access or links to a whole bunch of apps. Robert mentioned earlier about meditation. They have like a meditation app. Tracking app, right? Substance use app. There are a whole bunch of apps that you can use for free that you can download. And I think it's a really cool resource these days. There's also the Office of Mental Health, which is a state agency. They also have a support helpline that's available 24/7. So that's very accessible as well. And the last one is NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. It's a really great organization. They have tons of resources around how to access help, support. They do a lot of kind of engaging people in peer support. So, you know, someone with a lived experience, right, that can kind of help you through whatever you might be going through. So, you know, I really encourage you to check some of these out. So I think that's the end of our presentation, and I think we want to take the time now to take some questions and maybe have a general discussion.
Yeah, great, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that information. So we have a whole bunch of questions that came in through the chat, and so I'm going to sort through some of these, and some of these were mentioned throughout the presentation, but as they came in, I think it's really good to continue to highlight some of these and address them specifically. So Dr. Bryant, let's start with you. The first question we have, it says, over the last couple of months with COVID-19, people are adjusting to different ways of work. Are there any particular things that we should be looking to remind people to be doing in general?
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I briefly jumped off because where I'm at, the power went out. I'm down the Jersey Shore, and we have no power. So it's hopefully not a portent of what's coming up to New York this afternoon, but it's pretty stormy down here. Anyway, I was flexible enough that I closed my eyes. I did some mindfulness and thought, okay, how do I get back on? And I realized, oh, wait, I have a phone. I can do that. So it just shows you the power of just kind of meditating for a little bit and then, coming up with an answer rather than panicking, because I panicked when my computer blew out here. Anyway, back to the point. This and Robert talked about it, and so did Dr. Yoon. These are certain times, and really, just incredibly challenging times. So one of the things I think you have to do is prepare yourself mentally and say, for many of us, we're gonna be home for a while working remotely, and that's like sort of the first thing, the hurdle you have to sort of accept the fate that we're in right now. Many of us who are in the academic settings probably won't be going back at least until the spring, if maybe not for the academic year. The other thing is, and was alluded to during Robert's presentation when he spoke about just structuring your day, even if that means getting up in the morning and getting dressed as if you're going to work and not staying in your pajamas. You don't have to get the full gear on, but at least sort of, and making sure you have an environment, a working environment in your house or apartment, a space that maybe allows some privacy if you can, so that you can, just carve out some space for yourself, and taking breaks throughout the day. Not just working 7 straight hours or being on Zoom for 4 hours. It can be extremely emotionally draining. So it's really important that you build in breaks throughout the day. And Robert mentioned the end, like at 6 o'clock, just breaking away and doing something fun with the family. But really structuring your day, and working remotely is a challenge. Everybody thought it was so easy. I wish I could work from home, but there are a lot of people saying, "Man, I can't wait to get back to the office." Well, you may not be able to get back to the office, so make the best of what you can. I'm sure the other folks on the webinar panelists can add to that, but those are some of my suggestions. Just kind of structure the day, as you're at home, and building in some really good breaks for yourself throughout it.
Great, thank you.
I think that's great. I agree. I remember in the beginning, I didn't even bother getting dressed, right? And then the day would just melt into another one. And then it was really when I consciously decided to say, no, I get up in the morning, I'm going to do my regular routine and pretend, right, to go to work. And most importantly, actually turn off the computer when it's time to get off work. I think a lot of people stay on much longer than they need to when they're working from home. The other piece is I guess that social interaction, right? I've been in with the team, we talk about maybe setting aside to connect with our colleagues and coworkers outside of work, right? So maybe at 4:30, right, get together for like an early online happy hour, right? Connecting with your colleagues in a different way can also just maintain some of the health around the work relationships.
And just some technical tips too, like you may have to make adjustments to your physical environment. So when I first started working from home, my eyes would bother me from staring at the computer all day. And I was getting headaches, right? My lower back was hurting from sitting in an uncomfortable chair. So consciously, if you have access to certain things, I bought these like blue light glasses on Amazon. These are not prescription. I'm actually wearing contacts, but these cool things are like $15, and they really do help with the glare coming off your computer screen. And then also I bought like a little cushion to support my back, again, like $10, just to make your environment a little more comfortable. So just a couple of extra specific tips.
Yeah, I also say change your virtual background every once in a while. Change it up a little bit, make a game out of it. Some of my colleagues have done that. And it's and you can get quite creative with doing some things. Make some fun out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all great advice. And following up with that conversation, so we're all doing this work, school, life balance, and it's happening in the same environment, whether it's a small apartment, a home. How do you have any tips for that? I know we've discussed a little bit, but can you guys speak directly to some tips for that, please?
I'll take that first and pass the
Sure.
baton to everybody. I realize not everybody has the luxury of having multiple bedrooms in a house or a space. But if you need to, and some folks only have maybe one or two devices that they can use to work on from home. So it's important that you sort of get with everybody in the household and try to come up with a schedule if you can, or letting people know when you need to be on the computer, or sharing, carving out an area in the house dedicated, sort of your office for this time period. That's probably the best advice I have right now to do, and just to make sure that when you are on Zoom meetings and things like that, where requires privacy, that you also let the other family members or friends or roommates know that you'll need that time in there, on that computer. Robert or Dr. Ewing?
Yep. I mean, sorry, Dr. Ewing, you want to jump in?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I think the there's no easy answers or textbook answers to any of these kinds of questions, especially ones that are coming up in the chat as well. Like, it's all about creativity, right? And so you have to find ways to be creative, right? One of these memes that I share usually during presentations is of this little Filipino boy in the Philippines. My family's from the Philippines, who is in a McDonald's parking lot with a stool. I don't know if you all have seen it. And he's studying with his book and a pencil, right? And the reason the meme went viral was because someone put it on Instagram and put hashtag inspired by a kid. When they did more research on the story, they found that the kid was on the floor with the stool in the McDonald's parking lot because he was homeless and had no electricity. So he was using the light that was coming from the window of the McDonald's restaurant, because in the Philippines, you can't go inside unless you're eating something, you're paying. So the point is, of me sharing that, it's about creativity. I've worked with students who live in a household with 13 other individuals, and their place to study was the stoop. Right? Again, it's not ideal. None of this is ideal, but we are in the middle of something that has never happened before. So you got to be creative. Maybe it's sitting outside. Maybe it's going in the back of your building. Maybe it's going to a park where it's not that populated and wearing your mask and studying. Maybe it's going outside of a Starbucks where you can pick up the Wi-Fi signal, but like you don't need to go inside. I mean, again, it's about creativity, right? It's not ideal, but we will get through if we kind of think outside the box a little bit also. So.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say that, just taking brief walks. I try to do that as much as I can, right? So if I was in the office and I was going to get up and walk around the office just to kind of mingle with others, right? I would take that time and actually go outside, maybe walk around the block, right? With a mask on. Or, when it's lunchtime, I think it's very tempting to just sit in the same room, bring your food right in front of you, in front of the computer, and just eat as you work. I think just make sure that you put that structure in, that you actually leave your work area and actually, change your environment, and really make the time to sit down and have a meal, maybe on FaceTime with a friend or with a colleague, right? And do like a lunch date. I think those are some of the things that really, it's very helpful, just emotionally keep you a little bit more connected.
I just want to add one other thing, and I tie into a question that I saw in the chat about school-age children and how do you support them during this time. And I was going to answer this question again with this comment. I have a 16-year-old daughter who yesterday asked me, Dad, I'm don't really think I want to go to school, because they have the option now in the public school. By Friday, they have to let the system know whether they want to go in part-time or they'll go stay at home full-time. And she said, but I'm thinking about getting together with my friends, like 3 of us, because this is her words, I'm much more productive when I'm with other people. And there's 2 friends of mine and I are planning that maybe we'll get together and study and work together in the house, take turns in different apartments, make sure that we're tested and all of that. And I thought that was a great idea, but she doesn't want to go to school. She doesn't want to risk going on the bus and getting to school. But because she thinks the isolation is more difficult for her being around other people while she's doing it, even though they go to different high schools, that even though there'll be the 3 of them together doing their work, she feels she'd be much more productive. And I thought that's a great creative way to sort of tackle that issue, because she found out that working by herself, and she's an A+ student, was very difficult during this academic year.
Yeah, that's great. Let's delve into that question a little bit more. Thank you, Dr. Bryant. How can we support school-age children during these uncertain times, whether it's a child or a sibling of one of our students, or one of our CUNY staff members working from home and trying to juggle all of that? What would be some of the advice that you guys would give? I know, Dr. Bryant, you touched upon that a little bit, but we can start with you if you'd like to elaborate.
Well, I'll let the others, and then I'll chime in afterwards.
Okay, thanks.
So I think really it's important to, especially the younger kids that may not necessarily be, proactive and upfront about talking about what they're feeling and or what they're thinking about what's happening, right? So I think it's really important to spend the time to have a discussion with them around what they may be seeing on TV, what the adults might be talking about, and really engaging them, right? So, I'm sure, right, just like the rest of us, the younger kids have anxieties, worries about what's happening, what is it going to become, right? But really having that discussion and talking about what exactly the anxieties and fears are, and helping them come together with a simple plan as to how to manage that, right? And as they hear things, not just sit there and process it themselves, but to bring it to you or to a parent, right? Or someone that they can kind of talk through and help formulate a very specific plan on managing some of these things that might bubble up over time.
And I would add to that also, kind of broadening out a little bit, right, in terms of us as parents, finding ways to support yourself first. So I always tell folks, before you can feed others, you always have to feed yourself first. And so I'm a father of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old who stay home all day. And they're not quite school age, but they run the house. So they're going to come in when they want to. They're going to ask daddy to play. There's no such thing as lunch hour anymore. It's, Dr. Yoon mentioned staying in your office with your food. I'm like, ooh, that'd be great. But those days are gone, right? And so it's all about finding ways to use your social support systems, right? I can't do this by myself. I have a great team with my wife and my mother who happens to come over and help us out, right? Not everyone has that, but I'm fortunate to have that. So you have to use your team. Someone earlier in the chat mentioned about how important is it to engage in a group or peer activity for your mental health. Well, this is a similar sort of group activity. It's about using the social support you have, and to Dr. Bryant's point earlier, creating that structure still, right? So we all have things to do. I'm not the only one working, right? I'm not the only one with things that need to get done. So I have to coordinate my time with my wife's time, with my mother's time, to try to make sure that these kids are taken care of and entertained all day. And if they have school lessons once they are school age, it would be the same thing. You have to carve out the time that you need to. And if push came to shove, I mean, honestly, you just have to make exceptions somewhere. If I needed to take some personal time from my work day, to tend to my kids' education, then that's what it would be. I would have to use vacation time, something like that. I mean, you have to find ways to do the best that you can. But again, it starts with that growth mindset of just doing the best you can, not trying to be perfect. Because if you hold on to that perfection ideal, you'll surely be disappointed, and then it's just going to make you more stressed out in the long run.
Thanks, guys. It was great advice, great suggestions. just something that came to mind when you guys were talking is that just on the side, I have a small practice, and my number one referrals, fortunately, I've been able to take them is parents calling, how do I work with my kid? My kid's basically shut down, doesn't want to do their schoolwork right now, and what do I do? Well, I had the fortunate time of meeting a grandmother, speaking to a grandmother at length, who has a 15-year-old at home and who basically shut down and said that I didn't want to do any work. And what she did with him was, I thought she was up back, good background in social work, by the way, told me what she did was actually she sat down with him. I found out he was just totally overwhelmed. He was just overwhelmed with everything. And she then broke it down with him and made a list of things that he had to do and just sat with him and basically checked off. Like there's an African proverb, yeah, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time, okay? So that's what she did. She just took it one step at a time, broke down tasks, broke down things, did one day, even if it was late, said, we're still going to get it in. We're still going to get it in. Because the schools right now are flexible. They understand. You have to understand, you have to appreciate that the school systems themselves appreciate the fact, and they should appreciate the fact that you can't do everything perfectly right now. So her goal was just to get a couple of things done each and every day. That's it. And that worked like a charm. He just started to do things one day at a time. And that's what I just take, one step at a time. So it's overwhelming. As we said earlier, as Dr. Yoon said, it's very overwhelming for a second grader, third grader, and they're missing the contact, the personal contact with their peers and all that. So it's just, trying to put yourself in their shoes and just taking it a step at a time, baby steps at a time, literally.
Great. All great information, and thank you guys for elaborating on that. Another question that just came through from one of our participants is, with Cuomo's quarantine for 14 days for those who are traveling from hotspots, any advice to those who have to live with someone who has to quarantine due to these travel restrictions?
I think that is certainly a really difficult situation, depending on, right, your living situation, on how much room you have or not. But I think in general, it is probably the best practice to set aside an area of your home where the person that needs to be quarantined is. Whenever possible, it would be a separate room. If there needs to be some sort of contact, of course, always with a mask on, even within the house, and particularly if you're living with someone that's vulnerable, right? Someone that's older, someone that has some medical conditions that will make them vulnerable. But trying to kind of ensure that the person that has to be quarantined to stay in one area of the home, masks when some contact is necessary, and of course, lots and lots of cleaning in between.
And from a social perspective, I think it's important to make sure that line of communication remains open. You still want to treat each other as normal as possible. Please don't treat the person who's coming back from the hot spot as some sort of alien that you're like, 6 feet away, please. Like, don't say good morning to me, right? Like, that's clearly going to create some stress and, interpersonal conflict between the two of you. So you want to just, like, okay, we're wearing masks. I mean, I think we're all struggling to do this. I live in an apartment building, and myself and my neighbors are struggling. Do we get in the elevator with each other, even though we're all wearing masks? Do we not? And you have to do what's comfortable for you, right? And so I will politely say, hey, good morning, but please go ahead. Like, I'll wait for the next one. There are ways to maintain your distance without being emotionally distant. Right? I saw this cool meme that says socially distant doesn't mean emotionally distant, right? And so you still want to make sure that you're connected to folks, okay? You just might have to do so 6 feet apart, but keep that in mind.
Thanks, guys. The only thing I'll add is, and it was a comment that was actually made in the chat from Helen about realizing how important sunlight is. She's realized how important sunlight is. So again, the point that was made, do not put this person like sort of in this dark room in solitary confinement, sliding the food under the door, make them feel like it was like an alien. Give them, if they have a room, they can get a window and they can get some sun in it. Let them get that at least, and take all the other precautions. But staying emotionally connected with them, so they don't treat them like a leper. Just they just need to be quarantined. Doesn't mean that they're have it. It's just that that's the precaution that you're taking. But if by all means, and for yourselves too, if as much sunlight that you can get, really, really important. There's something called seasonal affective disorder that is real. And it comes about a lot of times on us during the winter times when you start going to, we stop the daylight savings time and we go to the it gets dark out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, that's what this can feel like right now for us. So try to take advantage of this summer, take advantage of the sunlight, go out for a walk with your mask on, enjoy the sunlight. And if you're indoors, try to get still as much sunlight as possible into that room.
Great. So throughout this webinar series, we've been trying to give our student athletes and our students in general tips. So last week we focused on, kind of return to play from a physical perspective. Can you guys discuss the importance for exercise or activity for the mental health side of things? Athlete, non-athlete, just for everybody in this space and time that we're in.
I'll just start off with this because first of all, I do a lot of work with the NCAA. I'm on their management council, and obviously this is a big topic right now. And for you D3 student athletes out there, just know that there's a recommendation out there that's been made, and it's going to be actually decided upon perhaps today by the Board of Governors. That's pretty much going to shut down D3 athletics, at least the championships for the fall. But this is a really important question for everybody, and exercise. And a few years ago, the American Psychiatric Association said one of the main treatments for depression, in addition to therapy and maybe sometimes medication, is exercise. So getting out and walking and doing whatever you can, even if it's just going to the park, as we mentioned, and doing your reps and all of those kinds of things. Exercise, movement, extremely important. So if you're not going to get into competition or practices, you can still have a workout either in your home or outside, but it is truly, it does, what happens with exercise, it releases something called the endorphins, and your endorphins make you feel good. So it's good for everybody, whether you're an athlete or not, to do something to get your body moving. I'm sure Robert and Dr. Kuhn will add on that, but that's just some of my tips on that topic.
Yeah, I would echo that. There's a lot of evidence out there and a lot of studies that have been done around the positive effects of exercise on mental health in general. So, I think that is kind of one of the, and whether you have a mental health condition or not, right? Exercise has been one of the kind of pillars of mental health and maintenance of mental health. So, I myself, I do kind of like a video HIIT workout at home. And, not being able to go to the gym or even really outside and engage in kind of sports, a team-based sports is really hard. But I think just finding ways to do that, as Dr. Brian mentioned, is really important.
And I would echo everything that you all said. I just would add to that, for student athletes, I imagine it's much more difficult too, this, not being able to participate in your craft, if you will, right? I think it brings up all kinds of emotional and mental concerns about, like, will I still be as good? Will I still be as fast? Will I still be as strong? And I think it's important to recognize that and pay attention to those thoughts. It does, again, going back to my earlier advice on self-care, you want to challenge those negative thoughts, but I think it is super important to acknowledge them, that they may be operating for you. I too agree that, when this pandemic hit and we were all quarantined, or some students said lockdown, there was a huge loss involved in not being able to do physical activity. I mean, I myself used to go to the gym during my lunch hour at BMCC, and so, or go for a run. And so I was already anticipating I'm going to be in my house for like the next 3 months. So I like went on Amazon and bought some workout tower that I could throw some like weights on, just because I kind of knew what was going to happen. And, you know, not all of us have that luxury. I get it. But again, it's super important for all the research reasons, but even just for just like your own stress release, right? I mean, it's just, it's part of your routine. It's part of the structure, and any loss of that structure or routine can feel like a big blow to you. So yeah, now that we're sort of opening up again, maybe you can get outside, but again, if you can't, like Dr. you mentioned, you know, like Dr. Bryant mentioned, there's many ways to be active inside your house, and do alternate variations of exercises and things. But again, it's just more for your mental health as well. Mm-hmm.
Great, that's great advice. We're running close to the end here. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I also wanted to give our panelists an opportunity for a last thought or some final advice that you would like to share with our students. It could be a tip on how to get through this. It could be something that you really want to stress. But Dr. Bryant, let's start with you. Your parting shot.
Okay, great. Thanks. Just a couple of things. One, in terms of resources, and I just thought of it is when the last slide came on, particularly for student athletes, the NCAA at ncaa.org, the SSI, Social Science Institute, has a wealth of information on mental health, substance abuse, COVID-19, sexual abuse prevention, a plethora of information there. And I would suggest you go there, again, ncaa.org, SSI, and you'll see lots of information. And they have updated information on even COVID-19 and pandemic and things like that. So I'd certainly suggest that. Robert and Dr. Kuhn covered most of it. You know, the things that I'll just reiterate, there were 5 M's that I say during this time. Mindfulness, okay, mastery, find something that you do well, maybe learn a new skill, new language, do something, a hobby. I know somebody who's got now painting furniture and selling it. She found furniture on the street and painting it and making money off of that. Movement, meaningful relationships, and Robert said a very important thing, stay off that freaking social media and news and all of that. You know, stop staring and comparing. Okay, very important not to get on social media. Call up a friend. Call up somebody that you haven't spoken to a long time. Call a grandparent. Check in on them. You know, meaningful relationships during this time, not superficial relationships, folks. Meaningful relationships. Call an old school buddy of yours that you haven't heard from in a long time. I've been hearing from people I haven't heard from in years, checking in on me. I love it. And last but not least, maintain a sense of humor. You know, do something fun. Laugh at yourself. You know, humor is extremely important. I laugh with my kids. I actually listen to music. I'm turned on with their music now. And, you know, it's great. You know, they're discovering my music. I mean, it's just a wonderful time. But laughing with your kids is really important. Okay, there you go. Somebody said they picked up their guitar from the years ago. Yeah, do something like that. You know, it's an opportunity. You know, every challenge, there's an opportunity. So do something new. That's my parting advice.
That's great, Dr. Bryant. I just want to say a few words about resiliency, right? The idea of resiliency is that as people, we can always, we'll always be faced with challenges. I think that's just how life is, right? It's a matter of how we meet those challenges and how we come out at the end. That really speaks to, you know, who we are as people, right? And the more, there's an idea that the more we go through challenges and face them, the more resilient we become. And that truly ultimately builds your ability to become healthier and emotionally as well as mentally. And I think most of us will become a lot more resilient because of this. And I think it's really wonderful that even taking the time to come to something like this shows that you are in a better place already, that you're willing to learn, you're willing to get new information, and maybe do this a little bit better. Really speaks to resiliency. And, you know, I really want to leave you with that idea.
Thank you.
And related to that, I guess I'll just add, you know, maintain a strengths-based perspective. So meaning that, like I mentioned, growth mindset before, right? You already have everything you need to get through this, okay? You just have to tap into it. You have strengths that you bring with you. Just like in an uncharted situation, you may feel like, well, I've never surfed before, so I don't know how to do this. But maybe you know how to swim. Maybe you've balanced yourself on a subway. Maybe there are skills that you can transfer from other parts of your life experience to this situation that we're all facing, right? And last but not least, remember to use your support system. So every great player in every sport is part of what? A team, and not just a team of teammates, but a team of coaches, a team of other people who are there to help them be their best. So even though COVID is trying to make us all be in this socially isolated, like snow globe, if you will, right? We need to use the people and use the surrounding resources that are around us. So just connect with others. Oh, and last but not least, for all the men out there, right? So mental health and seeking mental wellness is not a sign of weakness. There's no stigma associated for seeking counseling or mental health. I just want to put that out there on record, because I think for a lot of men of color, you know, we say, oh, we just got to man up. And no, you do not have to man up. You need to use your resources and use your support. Even LeBron is not on Team LeBron. LeBron is on the Lakers, right? Steph Curry is on the Golden State Warriors. So again, use your support systems, and there's no pride or no shame in doing so.
Robert, on that note, LeBron has been big advocate of using apps for meditation,
right.
for calm. He's been at the forefront with a lot of these pro athletes on mindfulness and things like that. So, yeah, like you said, it's not a time to man up. This is, you know, in fact, manning up is admitting, you know, you need help. Those 3 words are the hardest words in the I need help. So, man up that way.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys very much for your time. And once again, thank you to Health First for sponsoring this Talk About It Tuesday webinar with CUNY Athletics. And for our panelists and all our attendees, all this great information will be on cunyathletics.com, and you'll be able to revisit this if and when you need it, or pass it along to somebody who does. So till next week, take care and take care of each other. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.